So are you all bundled up now for the winter? We've been talking to you in the last couple of weeks about the deep freeze that we're going to have. We are in the middle of it. Hi, I'm Jeff Williams, host of North Star Oasis. We're here for another jam-packed, action-filled information blitz coming at you for this next hour. Thank you for joining us today. We have been talking about the weather. We have been following Joe Bastardi from Weather Bell in his daily updates and Saturday summaries. He has predicted this deep freeze back in October, and he was right on schedule. Before everybody else is talking about a deep freeze, Joe Bastardi was out predicting it months in advance. So we have been following that closely, and I'll tell you this, it's a whole lot easier to stomach this when you know what's coming next. And actually, I'm excited about what's coming next with the weather. So we're going to show you today, January 4th, 2018. Happy New Year, by the way. We're going to show you today's daily update from Joe Bastardi and Weather Bell, because the very, very, very end of this, he's got a pleasant surprise for you coming up.
Weather Analytics meteorologist Joe Bastardi. His map went out yesterday. It's still applicable now. And this is 6 to 12 inches locally, 18 here, 2 to 6 inches locally, 10 back in here. This is 12 to 24 in here, and that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Center is we're forecasted to be at 7 a.m. And of course, the other source forecasts have shifted west toward this map. So, you know, I can't cover storms. The nowcaster storm. My job is to set you up as far ahead as you could. If you watch the Saturday summary, we were talking about this and the threat of the big East Coast storm back then. So that's 5 days before, and at that time, all the models were out to sea. This has been tracking. There's a track to this warm eddy. It's been tracking eastwards. Probably going to come up to around here, come out, and let's see if it does some looping or half loops here on the cloud photographs. You can watch other sources for that, and they will be able to track that for you. And what happens is the upper feature is a little bit north of the surface center, so the surface center is rotating, and chances are the feedback of these different temperature gradients with the sea surface temperatures is impacting the storm. Now, I'm not supposed to put this on. I do every once in a while. Public sites available on the premium. It's the European low temperatures for Saturday night. Do not laugh at these. This is entirely possible. And Saturday may be one of the top 5 coldest days if you live in this, well, not here. If you live in this area of the country, may be one of the top 5 coldest days that you've experienced. New York City, a high of 7 and a low of -8 or whatever it has. That would be phenomenal, okay? Now, climate change people, I call them climate ambulance chasers, where they just wait until something happens and claim there's climate change, say this is climate change. Just want to again review you. I use these analogs set from October, early start to the winter. So we got closer. What we did for our clients back in October, November is pinpoint a 30-day period, December 7th through January 5th, that would look like these blended analogs here that I have, which shows years ranging all the way back to 1933. I can't use this every year. I could use it this year because 2010, 2005, 1995, 1950, and 1933 were all showing up. So what I did was, is because of research I've done on my own, all right, I said, okay, let's look out for that. With 4 days left in the period, December 7th, this is December 7th through January 1, how close is that? Look at that, okay? And that's what I do. You got to understand that all I want to do is put out a right forecast for people who actually value that information, or at least give them the jump. No one can really argue, well, that this is a perfect analog, because look, it's warm in Texas, right? And this says Texas is cold. But it gives you a general idea of where you're going. And I don't do it after the fact and blame it on something else. You know, if I saw, here's a fact. If you were me and know what you know about past weather patterns, not because I'm cocky, it's because I love it and I research it. It's unbelievable watching what some of these people are saying. They're younger than me, they're smarter than me, they have PhDs, and God bless you, that is an amazing accomplishment. I can't do it, okay? But I'll tell you what, I don't think you've gotten down in the dirt and dug for past weather and understand what the weather is capable of doing and what it has actually done, because you wouldn't make those comments saying, oh, it's climate change. By the way, the climate always changes, and I believe in climate change also. I just argue over what the reason is for it. All right. By the way, when the thaw comes in 2 weeks, they'll blame that on climate change too. And yet January thaws are legendary in fast-starting winters. Here's the next 5 days, and then there's the 6 to 10. And you can see we're stepping out of this. And once we get to day 15 through 25, woo! Okay? All right, that's it for now. Enjoy the weather. It's the only weather you got.
So sometime around January 13th, 14th, 15th, somewhere in that time frame, about 7 to 10 days from now, we are going to warm up. I can shed these sweaters. I'm wearing 2 of them today because the temperature outside right now is about 0, and it's a little chilly in the studio. So I'm bundled up, trying to stay warm, but I know that the warm air will be coming in about a week. So 1 more week of this stuff, and I think with as much as we've gone through already, I think I can handle it. I think you can too. But we're getting on the cusp of getting back to normal. Well, that's going to be nice. So we'll have abnormal warming, which is good. And then we'll have normal cooling, which will be back to, by February, we'll be kind of back to a normal winter. I kind of like that. So that's our daily update from Joe Bastardi. We'll see what he says next week. And, we'll bring in Joe Bastardi when we know that there's going to be, weather, especially weather that impacts us in the upper Midwest. And we'll play his stuff occasionally, only because of the extreme weather event. We've been going a little heavier with him. But we'll kind of get back to a normal rhythm of the show in the next couple of weeks.
Whether you want to know it or not.
Yeah, whether you want to know it or not. So with that being said, we are actually going to move on to today's main topic. Usually around the first of the year, and since we are around the first of the year, we always seem to talk about Hollywood. What's going on in Hollywood? Well, you know that Hollywood wants your money, but they also want your mind. Here's today's Prager University segment.
Imagine a group of activists so powerful that they could beam their propaganda directly into your brain. Now also imagine that they're so sophisticated they actually get you to pay them to do it. Unfortunately, you don't have to imagine it. It's real. It's Hollywood. As big as the internet has become, Hollywood, and here I'm talking specifically about television, is still king. Not only does it reach hundreds of millions of people with its messaging, it embeds that messaging in seemingly innocuous stories. Stories that distract us from the hardships of daily life, stories that make us feel good, compassionate, and decent. We watch TV, in other words, because we like it. And just as Americans didn't think much about the carcinogens in the cigarettes they smoked for decades, most Americans don't think much about the toxic politics in the television they watch. But those who create that content do. They spin out hour after hour of slickly produced left-wing propaganda, and they give themselves awards for doing it. They applaud each other's courage, even though all their friends think exactly as they do. I spoke with nearly 100 members of the Hollywood community when I wrote my book, Primetime Propaganda, and many of them openly admitted they inserted social justice messages into their shows. How they do it is both clever and effective. Hollywood writers, producers, directors, actors create characters we keep wanting to spend time with, then have those characters act in ways most of us would judge wrong. Then, in effect, they ask us a question. Isn't it really okay that Rachel from Friends decided to have a baby without first marrying Ross? After all, you like Ross and you like Rachel. How can what they do be bad? It hasn't always been this way. For decades, Hollywood promoted traditional American values. That changed, as did so much else in the late 1960s and 70s, when Hollywood stopped celebrating American values and started transforming them. For example, in the early 1970s, abortion was a hotly contested issue. A year before the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court case, the top-rated TV sitcom Maude featured a storyline in which the title character of the show has an abortion. The LA Times described it as a watershed moment in TV history. Why? Well, because it removed the stigma of abortion. Millions of Americans, sitting in their living rooms, saw a beloved character do something they did not approve of, and they felt sympathy. Something similar happened in the early 2000s. Vice President Joe Biden was right when he said that Will and Grace had a major impact on how Americans think about same-sex marriage. Before the hit NBC show, though most Americans had a live and let live attitude toward private sexual behavior, few supported the idea of men marrying men or women marrying women. But seeing the charming and funny Will Truman live his life week after week paved the way for a much wider acceptance of same-sex marriage. Current shows like Orange is the New Black and Transparent are trying to effect the same change on the issue of transgenderism. You may think these are all good things, or that some are and some aren't. That's not my point. My point is that Hollywood has had a tremendous influence on our culture, and that influence has been all to the left side of the political spectrum. And it isn't just social issues. Chevy Chase liked to boast that he helped Jimmy Carter defeat Gerald Ford in 1976. He may be right. Week after week on Saturday Night Live, Chase portrayed Ford, probably the most athletic president in American history, as a bumbling, uncoordinated idiot. In the early 2000s, Comedy Central had a show, That's My Bush, that openly mocked the 43rd president. And of course, Hollywood despises Donald Trump. From crime dramas to the late-night comedy shows, he's relentlessly ridiculed. Somehow, Hollywood managed to take an 8-year hiatus from mocking presidents during the Obama years. But maybe that's just a coincidence. All of this programming has an effect. Scientific studies suggest that watching TV acts like a habit-forming drug. According to the market research firm Childwise, teenage boys spend 8 hours per day in front of screens, much of it consuming Hollywood propaganda. Dedicated religious parents might expose their children to 2 hours a week of religious instruction. Hands-on parents might spend 30 minutes a day discussing essential values with their kids. Hollywood gets up to 40 hours a week, every week. By all means, enjoy television. I do. But remember, the people making TV don't merely want to entertain you. They want to influence you. They want you to think like they think. And unless you're aware of what they're trying to do, chances are you will. I'm Ben Shapiro, editor of The Daily Wire for Prager University.
And of course, if you look at North Star Oasis, we want to influence you. I'm going to admit that. We want to influence you, but here's what we want you to do. We want to give you more information so you can think for yourself. I don't want you to think like me. There's only one of me. But what we try to do every single week is give you something that you don't see through the mainstream media. You don't read in the newspapers. We want to give you more information so you can be a better informed citizen. You know, that's why we talk about entertainment. That's why we talk about politics. That's why we talk about history. That's why we talk about community events. And that's the beauty of the show we put together, because we want to give you more useful information for which you can use to better your life. That's our agenda. We are agenda-driven. What is the truth? That's our agenda. We're not here to manipulate you. Your regular TV shows are, as Ben Shapiro just pointed out. And it's not just television. It's also what goes on in Hollywood, what you see on the big screen. And we are actually going to look at Paul Joseph Watson in his commentary right now about the truth about Hollywood.
Everybody comes to Hollywood. They wanna make it in the neighborhood. They like the smell of it in Hollywood. How could it hurt you when it looks so good?
The scandal surrounding Harvey Weinstein represents another watershed moment in the culture war. But from a wider perspective, it's just another symptom of Hollywood's terminal decline. More and more people are beginning to get jaded by popular culture. Hollywood just had its worst US box office summer season in 25 years. A 16% drop in revenue compared to last year. In the US, less tickets were sold in 2016 compared to 2002, despite there being almost double the number of movies playing in 2016 and a higher population. Americans are bored out of their minds and they're voting with their dollar. Studios once felt they could take more risks because even if a movie was a box office flop, DVD sales could recoup the loss. That safety net's disappearing fast. DVD sales are plummeting because Netflix and other on-demand services are eating up that market. That puts the onus on the studio not to take any risks. That's why there seems to be such a lack of diversity, such a paucity of new ideas. Everything's just a recycled franchise of superhero sequels because they know that brand recognition is always going to play well in the foreign market, mainly China. But now even those movies are starting to flop too. Everything is so stale, unimaginative, and tedious. But there's another reason for Hollywood's decline. With the political climate so polarized, many on the right are boycotting Hollywood because it's now become the primary vehicle for left-wing narratives. Make no mistake about it, this is a backlash against social engineering that is now prevalent in modern movies. Even the far left LA Times is asking, has Hollywood lost touch with American values? Look at Jennifer Lawrence, for example. Days after she goes on a bizarre anti-Trump global warming rant,
We voted, and it was really startling.
her new movie bombs and she announces she's quitting acting for 2 years. And yes, the primary reason is because the movie sucked. But with anti-Trump hysteria running rampant, studios, directors and actors increasingly see it as their role to become culture warriors, while pleasing the gods of political correctness by obsessing about diversity and gender balance. Top film critics with huge influence like Owen Gleiberman are openly calling on movies and awards shows to get even more political. Amplifying far-left axioms has taken precedence over and above what should be their only concern: making a good frigging movie. Conservative actors in Hollywood have been shunned for decades. James Woods famously said he never expected to work in Hollywood again after criticizing Obama. I'm routinely contacted by actors who have been fired or lost roles because their conservative beliefs were outed or because they voted for Trump. Being conservative in Hollywood is akin to being gay in the 1950s. They literally have to create clandestine secret societies just to be able to express their beliefs without fear of punitive measures.
The group is called Friends of Abe, named after Abraham Lincoln, and it's made up of 1,500 conservative members of the entertainment industry. They gather for things like meals and drinks and to learn about the political process.
We see the same thing with TV. Despite good ratings, ABC cancelled Tim Allen's Last Man Standing, with Allen making it clear why they took that decision.
I said there's nothing more dangerous to me, especially in this climate, than a funny, likable conservative. That was the most dangerous thing, that because he was mitigated on the show by a family of women that had different opinions, but the guy was a likable guy and really was a principled guy just about work and ethics and all this stuff. I think there's nothing more dangerous right now than a likable conservative.
But then look at late night TV. The less they focus on comedy and the more they focus on spouting left-wing talking points, the further their ratings plummet. All of these shows combined can barely get 8 million viewers. Jay Leno used to pull in almost that on his own. Could it possibly have anything to do with the fact that all these men share the same bland stance on every single issue, and that one show is barely any different from the next?
Everybody comes to Hollywood.
The 1970s is widely acknowledged by film buffs as the best decade for consistently high-quality movies. Why? Because directors were given the freedom to experiment. The directors had the power, not the studio. Their main focus was narrative and character development, not whether the cast ticked enough diversity boxes, not whether they genuflected forcefully enough to prevailing left-wing dogma. Now those factors are paramount, the quality of movies is noticeably declining. On the flip side, movies and TV shows that don't bow to identity politics, thought police, are becoming more popular. Over the last 5 years, we've seen a rash of successful throwback-style TV shows that have at their core the rediscovery of stereotypically masculine traits. Hunting, guns, cars. Now that's starting to cross over into movies. Look at the new Kingsman film. 3 white men, God forbid, play the lead roles. How rare would that be now in Hollywood? Look at the first Kingsman. The baddie is an insane environmentalist who wants to save the planet by culling the human race.
When you get a virus, you get a fever. That's the human body raising its core temperature to kill the virus. Planet Earth works the same way. Global warming is the fever. Mankind is the virus.
Do you really think the same people who bestowed Leo Private Jet DiCaprio with an Oscar so he had a platform to drone on about climate change would ever allow that depiction in a mainstream Hollywood production? That's not to say Kingsman is overtly political, it isn't, but it definitely has anti-Hollywood, anti-Silicon Valley populist strains. Don't take my word for it, The Guardian, which is hardly Breitbart.com, acknowledged that its success was partly due to its populist disposition. And look at the outcome. Despite being panned by the critics and by establishment lefty film reviewers, when it came to the box office, Kingsman 2 outperformed a string of Hollywood blockbusters, including Pirates of the Caribbean and Wonder Woman. Why was it panned by the critics? Because the director, Matthew Vaughn, accurately talks about how Hollywood is in crisis, and they despise him for it. The success of Kingsman amongst ordinary punters suggests that he's right to play the contrarian. We don't have a bunch of Hollywood suits telling us what to do, said Vaughn. If we did, I promise you wouldn't be liking the movie. There's clearly an appetite for classical authenticity represented by Kingsman, and a growing distaste for dogmatic virtue signaling represented by mainstream Hollywood. But in terms of mass entertainment, it's not just Hollywood that people are turning away from. The 2017 VMAs, a relentless rhetorical vomit fest of anti-Trump pearl clutching.
If we were to all stand up, united as one, our impact, it would be
drew the lowest ratings in MTV's history. Its viewership has been declining for years. The Emmy Awards, during which Stephen Colbert repeatedly sniped at Trump throughout his opening monologue, also had its worst result ever in the key viewing demographic. We see the same phenomenon in sports. ESPN, which seems to be transforming from a sports network into some kind of social justice activist hybrid, has lost 7.4% of its subscribers in just 2 years. Its average total viewers have dropped 19.4% since 2014. Those drops are partly due to ESPN jumping on every identity politics bandwagon that comes along. Case in point, ESPN rebranded its Sports Center show to include political debate. Same result, they lost viewers. Same with the NFL. Since the Take a Knee controversy, ratings are down. The NFL has already lost millions of viewers since last year over the same issue. A new poll shows that 80% of Americans want less politics during sporting events. Recall the huge sigh of relief when Lady Gaga's halftime Super Bowl performance didn't include anything political. A clear majority of Americans say they're watching less football this year, with 69% saying it's because they're sick of, quote, players using the NFL as a stage for their political views. Whereas movies, music, and sports once provided a refuge for people seeking to escape political polarization, these forms of popular culture are now the main vehicle of indoctrination. This probably reflects the left's nervousness that it's losing ground in the culture war. Having dominated for so long, there's a growing insecurity that the tide could be turning. Generation Z is the most conservative since World War II. That's why the left feels the urge to constantly reinforce their dogma. Politics is downstream from culture, which is why both the left and the right wage holy war over the messages embedded in movies, television, music, and sports. And the left is beginning to feel its grasp slipping. Popular culture and counterculture cannot be truly independent and diverse if weighed down with the onerous burden of having to constantly regurgitate a partisan creed. True art thrives when it can connect with people at the level of universal human archetypes, ideas, sentiments, and concepts that exist beyond the realm of petty, sectarian, political squabbles.
So there you have it. That's what's going on in Hollywood. Hooray for Hollywood. That's what they used to sing in, what, the 50s, 60s? Yeah, now it's boo-hoo for Hollywood. That's got there's a lot of truth to it. And this goes back actually to 2012 when then Governor Mitt Romney, who may actually be running for U.S. Senate in Utah, former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney made a statement at a fundraiser when he was running for president about not getting the votes of 47% of the country. words to the effect, paraphrasing. And of course, that was hugely controversial at the time, and that is one of the things that may have cost him the election. But Romney had just alienated half the country with his remarks. And then 4 years later, Hillary Clinton comes out and calls half of the country a basket of deplorables. She alienated half the country. And Hollywood does the same thing. Hollywood wants to throw the values from one half of the country at the other half of the country. And then they wonder how come the other half of the country just responds by not showing up to see films. It's a no-brainer. If Hollywood would get back to entertaining without the political social justice warrior, political correctness crap, and just give us good stories, I don't think you'd have people in this country rebelling. The other thing I want to point out is the expense of which it takes to go to see a film in a theater. I saw 2 films recently, and I'm going to tell you about the experience of both of them. But I'm going to say this. With one of them, I purchased a single ticket, because I went just by myself, and I bought a regular-sized drink and a regular-sized popcorn. Combined total for one person, $25. Just to go and get popcorn, pop, and a ticket. $25. Now, the other film I saw with a friend of mine, his Christmas present to me was to take me out to see the Star Wars Last Jedi. It was the discount movie night. So he bought the tickets and the concessions, and for the 2 of us, with concessions, popcorn, pop, and he also added a candy bar to the mix, plus 2 tickets, was $28. So on a discount movie night, you can get 2 people in for the cost that it takes 1 on a premium night, including concessions. That gets a little outrageous. Now, can you imagine a family of 4? Just to go and see the newest film at the theater, you got to shell out $100. Yikes. So that being said, we are actually going to show you now the trailer of the newest Star Wars film, The Last Jedi.
When I found you, I saw raw, untamed power. And beyond that, something truly special.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
I've seen this raw strength only once before. It didn't scare me enough then. It does now. Let the past die. Kill it. If you have to. That's the only way to become what you were meant to be. Going to go the way you think. Fulfill your destiny.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
This is not going to go the way you think. Episode 7 didn't go the way we thought either. Episode 7, The Force Awakens, if you recall, and since the film's been out, I may release a few spoilers. If you haven't seen it yet and don't want a spoiler, well, just block your ears. I'm not going to really talk too much about The Last Jedi yet, other than to say that the whole franchise, since Disney took it over, has changed completely. It really has, and there's a reason behind that, and it goes to the executive producer. It's not George Lucas. George Lucas relinquished control of the franchise when he sold the enterprise over to Disney for $4 billion. I mean, George Lucas made out like a bandit. Now it's like, yeah, what do I care? I mean, it's Disney's fault, but I got my money. J.J. Abrams pretty much gave us his philosophy in a TED Talk about a year or so back, and he calls it the mystery box. So let's take a look at his an excerpt from his TED Talk. I had actually watched the whole thing, but I think this is probably the most crucial 4 minutes of his entire discussion, because this sheds the light on everything we are seeing that is wrong with Star Wars.
Well, what are stories but mystery boxes? There's a fundamental question. In TV, the first act is called the teaser. It's literally the teaser. It's the big question. So you're drawn into it. Then, of course, there's another question, and it goes on and on and on. I mean, look at like Star Wars. You got the droids. They meet the mysterious woman. Who's that? We don't know. Mystery box, you know. Then you meet Luke Skywalker. He gets the droid. You see the holographic image. You learn, oh, it's a message. You know, she wants to, you know, find Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's her only hope. But who the hell is Obi-Wan Kenobi? Mystery box. So then you go, and he meets Ben Kenobi. Ben Kenobi's uncle is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Holy shit, you know. So it keeps it. Have you guys not seen that? It's huge. Anyway, so there's this thing with mystery boxes that I started feeling like compelled. Then there's a thing of like mystery in terms of imagination, the withholding of information. You know, doing that intentionally is much more engaging, whether it's like the shark in Jaws. If Spielberg's, you know, mechanical shark Bruce had worked, it would not have been remotely as scary. You would have seen it too much. In Alien, they never really showed the alien, terrifying. Even in a movie like, you know, like a romantic comedy, The Graduate, they're having that date, remember, and they're in the car, and it's loud, and so they put the top up, and they're in there. You don't hear anything they're saying. You can't hear a word, but it's the most romantic date ever, and you love it because you don't hear it. So to me, there's that. And then finally, there's this idea, and stretching the sort of paradigm a little bit, but the idea of the mystery box, meaning what you think you're getting than what you're really getting. And it's true in so many movies and stories. I mean, you look at E.T., for example. E.T. is this, you know, unbelievable movie about what? It's about an alien who meets a kid, right? Well, it's not. E.T. is about divorce. E.T. is about a heartbroken, divorced, crippled family, and ultimately this kid who can't find his way. Die Hard, right? Crazy, great, fun, action-adventure movie in a building. It's about a guy who's on the verge of divorce. He's like showing up to L.A., tail between his legs. There are great scenes, maybe not the most amazing dramatic scenes in the history of time, but pretty great scenes. There's a half an hour of investment in character before you get to the stuff that you're, you know, expecting. When you look at a movie like Jaws, the scene that you expect, we have the screen, these are the kind of, you know, scenes that you remember and expect from Jaws. And she's being eaten, there's a shark. The thing about Jaws is it's really about a guy who is sort of dealing with his place in the world, with his masculinity, with his family, how he's going to, you know, make it work in this new town. This is one of my favorite scenes ever, and this is a scene that you wouldn't necessarily think of when you think of Jaws, but it's an amazing scene.
Give us a kiss.
Why?
Because I need it.
Come on. Why? Because I need it? Best scene ever, right? Come on. So you think of Jaws. So that's the kind of stuff that, like, you know, the investment of character, which is the stuff that really is inside the box. You know, it's why when people like do sequels or rip off movies, you know, of a genre, they're ripping off the wrong thing. You're not supposed to rip off the shark or the monster. You got to rip off, you know, if you're gonna rip something off, rip off the character, rip off the stuff that matters. I mean, look inside yourself and figure out what is inside you, because ultimately, you know, the mystery box is all of it.
So, we talk about the mystery box. What really is the mystery box? Now, of course, I'm going to preface with one of the things that he said earlier is that his grandfather gave him a box. It was called the mystery box. It's a question mark. He's been hauling it around for all these years, and it just so happens that he's never opened it because he doesn't want to know what's in it, because it's that question and the anticipation of finding out what's in it that is intriguing, and therefore it's easier to just keep it a mystery. The mystery box really is suspense. That's really all it is. It's suspended disbelief. That's all he's talking about. Intentional withholding of information and how engaging it is. And all the plot points and the mystery box. It's another word of saying, we're going to keep you in suspense. He goes into talking about ripping off the wrong things. Having watched episode 7, he ripped off the wrong thing. He was the director of that film. What did J.J. Abrams do in that versus one or two of the Star Trek films that he had done? He essentially had rebooted the entire franchise by going back to what was done the first time so everybody can see it's a new repackaged version of the same stuff. There is absolutely no innovation amongst the characters. He talks about ripping off the characters, but he hasn't, he ripped off the characters, but he also ripped off the landscapes. He ripped off everything. Star Wars is not about that. Star Wars is really now a universal experience. And he missed the fact that the audience has an expectation. And that's what J.J. Abrams in Episode 7 and Rian Johnson in Episode 8, The Last Jedi, failed to accomplish. They failed to accomplish playing upon audience expectations. It's all fine to keep people in suspense. Who is Rey's parents? Of course, that was a big build-up and a huge letdown in The Last Jedi. But there was an expectation. The audience had already bought into the franchise back when George Lucas came out with the original trilogy in the 70s and 80s. That same core audience really wasn't too enamored with the prequels, but I guess I did understand later on that George Lucas, to my knowledge, did try to get a bunch of directors involved, and they turned them down for the prequels. But nonetheless, I mean, the prequels, they were the prequels. But the one thing I have to say about Lucas with the prequels is that at least he still maintained the original storyline. That the stuff that people had questions on in the episodes 4, 5, and 6, some of those were answered. Midichlorians, or was it, midichlorians? I can't remember. The creation of the Force is all with the midichlorians. And what do we get in Episode 8? Oh, it's all a lie, and nobody believes in that, and the Jedi have to die. That's completely contrary to everything that Lucas had built up in the 6 episodes that he had in the universe he created. And the audience, built up over the course of 40 years, has an expectation that that storyline is going to continue. And they're completely screwing it up. Part of it is the mystery box and J.J. Abrams' expectations on that. But part of it is, of course, the PC culture of Hollywood. Now we have the heroine who comes out and has to dominate everybody with the Force, and yet she has had very little, if any, training in how to deal with the Force. And yet, contrary to Luke Skywalker, Anakin Skywalker, these guys have had a lot of training. That was kind of what the whole episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, for the original trilogy was. Luke Skywalker is getting trained into how to use the Force. That was the whole thing. That was his training ground. It took 3 episodes to have a villain like Darth Vader, from the moment he walks onto the screen and grabs somebody by the neck to the time in 3 episodes later in Return of the Jedi when he dies by saving his son. I figure after 40 years, everybody pretty much knows that. It took 3 episodes to get the bad guy from establishing him as a character to establishing the anti-hero or the hero in Luke Skywalker to defeating the bad guy. And yet what do we have right now? We have Kylo Ren, who's a bad guy who's not intimidating. He already controls everything. He controls the dark side of the Force. And has he earned it? That's what I mean about the audience expectation. Episode 7, Episode 8 do not meet what the audience expectation is for this franchise, because it's been built up for a certain expectation over 40 years. And then you add the layers of political correctness, social justice warrior stuff, animal rights activism. That has really no place in a Star Wars film. That's where we're sitting at. Now let me show you another film trailer. This is from The Greatest Showman. This is the other film that I watched. This is the one that I paid $25 for. Now, during the playing of the trailer, my producer yelled out to me that, "Oh, P.T. Barnum, now I see why you wanted to see this one." Well, I am a big circus history nut, and I love the circus. We've covered that in previous episodes. By the way, our episodes are available on YouTube and Facebook, facebook.com/NorthStarOasis or youtube.com/NorthStarOasis. So check us out online. But now getting to the meat of this, I had absolutely no idea, and that's the thing, going back to audience expectations. I had no idea what, I knew it was going to be about P.T. Barnum. I didn't know exactly what they were doing with it. I don't watch television that much outside of North Star Oasis and maybe the occasional football game, so I didn't get a chance to really see the film trailers. This is a musical. It is a very well done musical. Yes, there is a little bit of the PC, social justice stuff. Thankfully, it's only a little hint. I had maybe 3 times where I raised an eyebrow, rolled my eyes, and didn't even have any times I cringed. That's kind of how I judge a film, you know? It's like, I did that a lot more with Star Wars The Last Jedi than I actually did with The Greatest Showman. But nonetheless, yeah, I didn't have any expectations here because I had, other than P.T. Barnum, I had absolutely no knowledge as to how, what to expect from this. I found it was absolutely fabulous. First of all, it's a PG film, which was really refreshing. Looking at it from a historian's eyes, I can tell you that they try, it's a very loose interpretation of P.T. Barnum. It really is very, very loose. They try to center it around the 1850s, which is probably the right time frame for a film of this nature. There are a lot of historical inaccuracies, so don't think that this is a be-all and end-all film about Barnum. Barnum is the greatest showman. Barnum's name is attached to this. That's why people show up. But really, the film, even if it wasn't about Barnum, would be exceptional in its own right. I actually do highly encourage people to see this. Now see, here is the difference between the two films. The Last Jedi and the J.J. Abrams version of Star Wars, they're trying to create their own mystery, and they're not playing the audience expectations, and the audience is getting dissatisfied by that. Whereas P.T. Barnum himself, back in the 1850s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, he himself knew that you needed to meet the audience expectations if you're going to keep them coming back for more. That's a huge difference between the two ideas, the two concepts in Hollywood. Barnum always wanted to make sure that if you paid him money to come in to see a show, that at least it met your expectations. If it didn't meet your expectations as a consumer, he would feel that he was doing something wrong. And that's the real P.T. Barnum. And no, he did not say there's a sucker born every minute, even though that is largely attributed to him. But there's a huge contrast in the idea of showmanship, that J.J. Abrams can learn a lot by understanding who P.T. Barnum was, because J.J. Abrams may be good with a film camera. He may be able to put together some incredible battle scenes, make great use of graphics, but a showman, he is not. As far as I'm concerned, the Star Wars franchise is dead. They've killed off all the original characters, and I have absolutely no idea where they're going to, unweave this mess, because really that's where it is right now. It's a mess. I will see Episode 9 when it comes out. I have now absolutely no expectations. For The Greatest Showman, I wouldn't mind seeing that one again. I thoroughly enjoyed that performance. And the circus acts were actually pretty wonderful. The casting was great. The singing was marvelous, even though there's really no recognizable song. It's a great film. But again, it comes down to the showman. Barnum was a showman. Hugh Jackman is kind of a showman. J.J. Abrams, you're no showman. Speaking of Hugh Jackman, let's take a look at a Q&A with Hugh Jackman. And that was Hugh Jackman discussing the film. It took him 7 years to put that together. Now, of course, music-wise, they mixed a lot of the modern stuff with the old-time look and feel, but that's what made it entertaining. I'm not going to come out and say, completely that, oh, because this music wasn't there, it's a worthless film. No, I just thought it was a great film. But again, they really went at length to make sure that the audience expectations were met. And I really wish J.J. Abrams and other directors would have done the same thing. So this is what's happening in Hollywood. If they get rid of a lot of the PC stuff and invite half of the country to watch their stuff again, they're going to see box office revenues rise. But in the meantime, if they continue this culture war against non-progressive thinking people, they're going to get the same results. They're going to find themselves out of work. So we're talking about the circus, we're talking about entertainment, and that means we are going to leave you today with, from 1887, Julius Fusick, The Entrance of the Gladiators. This is what he made in 1887. There are some cartoons that are overlaid so you can see something, but this goes back probably to the 50s. Enjoy. For Dallas Pearson, producer, I'm your host, Jeff Williams. You are watching North Star Oasis. And reminding you, there's only 354 shopping days left until Christmas. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.